Welcome to the weekly discussion of how the technology of today impacts the world of tomorrow. This is the Fill in the Blank podcast, and I'm Ross Strader, joined by my co-host Keith Abels. And you can follow us on Twitter at AskFITB or email us fitbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to know that you're listening and what you think about the Fill in the Blank podcast. Well, Keith, I don't know if you knew this, but this is our 25th episode of Fill in the Blank. Did you know that?
Indeed I did. This is the silver episode.
The silver episode. There are not a lot of things that make it to 25. I'm just saying.
This is true, and based on your comments last week, it didn't sound like you thought we would get to 25 either.
That's not what I meant. That's not what I... All the listeners know that's exactly the opposite of what I meant. So, all right. Well, hey, listen, let's follow up with some topics this week. I know there are two things. One of them is related to the Apple, and the other is related to the beloved Amazon Echo. So start with the Apple follow-up for us. What do we need to know about Apple this week?
Well, it's pretty simple. Don't buy any Apple products this week. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, and if you missed last week's episode, the reason not to buy them is because next Monday, June the 4th, is the WWDC, which Apple will be making some announcements. There's lots of speculations and rumors. We talked about those at our last episode. So if you want to catch up on that, listen to our last episode of Fill in the Blank podcast. So, and then we'll have a chance to talk about some of that next week.
The next week's episode will just only be about that. And our shows are somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. I'm just going to say this. If they announce a new iPad Pro, we're going to be here a while.
It might be part 1, part 2.
It could be. Stay tuned.
All right. So then Amazon Echo, they were in the news this week. That was interesting.
Well, okay. Apparently, I'm going to link to an article from the LA Times. Amazon Echo recorded a couple's conversation, then sent the audio to someone they knew. Apparently, Amazon is not quite in control of this device as much as they thought. And this is a lesson that this couple learned, and they, I'm guessing, have lost this family as an Amazon customer, at least for the foreseeable future. It's really not funny, but because it didn't happen to me, it's kind of funny. So reading from the article here, apparently one of the Amazon Echo devices in their home had silently sent recordings to a person's coworker without the couple's permission. And then, so what happened was, these people are at home, they get a phone call, and the person on the other end of the call says, "Unplug your Alexa devices right now, you're being hacked." And so through discussion, they figured out, or through a conversation, these people figured out that their Echo had recorded a conversation and then sent it to this person who actually worked for one of these people, so one of their employees. And, it mentioned like you were talking about hardwood floors, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, you really did hear us." So they feel like they can't trust this device anymore. The quote here says, "I'm never plugging that device in again. I can't trust it." And who can blame them, right?
Oh, that's a terrible situation. Absolutely.
Amazon says that the Echo woke up when it heard a word that sounded like Alexa, which mine do all the time. And here lately, they've been waking up to really just random words that sound, in my opinion, nothing like Alexa. I still have the trigger word for mine set as Alexa. I didn't change it to Echo or anything else that you can change it to. So it thought it heard Alexa, and then through the subsequent conversations, it thought it heard something that said send a message. And so Amazon says that it received a send message request through the ongoing conversation, at which point the Echo said out loud, "To whom?" And then the background conversation was then interpreted as a name in one of their contact lists. So they call this an unlikely string of events. But the problem is, if it doesn't recognize the words properly, then it increases the amount of these, quote, unlikely events happening, right? Unlikely string of events happening. So
absolutely.
Mine wakes up, it seems like more frequently these days, to misunderstood trigger words than it ever has. And I don't really know why. And I've got these around my house, as you know. So this was a little concerning for me. I haven't unplugged mine. I haven't really done anything drastic. I do believe that Amazon will, go attack this problem and correct it, because obviously this is against their interest here to not solve this problem, right? They can't have an issue where these things are doing this kind of thing. Otherwise, the business there will just tank. And with that, trust in Amazon will go with it, not just with Echo devices, but that has a pretty big ripple effect these days. So they need to get on top of this one, and it is going to be a bit of a PR issue for them for a while, but really it's a technical issue that they have to solve. And what's interesting is, we didn't even talk about this before the show, but I read an article earlier this week that the Google Home devices are now, finally for the first time, have actually passed the Amazon Echo devices in shipments. So at the time where Google is really coming on pretty aggressively with their home assistants, this is a terrible time for Amazon to have an issue like this. And even if they didn't have competition from Google, that's the one thing this thing can't do, is spy on you. You want to lose your trust with your customers and never get it back? Do this.
It makes it difficult. Here's what I didn't know until this happened. I didn't actually know that the Echo could record an audio conversation and actually send out an audio file like that. I was unaware it was able to do that.
I know you can send messages through it, and I'm guessing you could send maybe voice messages through it. I've never done that. I've never really had a reason to do that. So I guess it's just part of that functionality. I'd never really thought about it until this article came out that was a thing that it could do. Now, obviously, it records them because you can go into your Amazon Alexa app on your phone and go look at all the voice commands that you've ever done, and kind of see your history there, just like you can do with Google. So obviously it records them, but I did not realize that you could do that either. I don't know why you would want to do that.
I don't either. Well, so after this happened, my wife declared that ours is never being plugged in again, but it had actually already been unplugged because I played a prank on my wife through our Amazon Echo. Did I tell you this?
I think you did, but tell me again. I don't remember all the details.
All right. So Amazon Echo, I had set it up for her. She got it for Christmas. I set it up for her. And then when I had set it up, I downloaded the Echo, Amazon Echo app or Alexa app on her phone. But I also downloaded it on my phone as well. And so I was actually away from the house. It was in the evening. I was at a meeting, and I decided I'd play a joke on her. And so I opened up the app and began to play music from my phone to our Amazon Echo, which wasn't, which was at the house, and I wasn't at the house. And I kept playing the song, Rockwell's song, I Always Feel Like Somebody's Watching Me. And she kept going over and turning it off, and I could see when it had been, turned off or paused. So then I'd wait a few seconds, and I would start the song back up again. And it totally freaked her out, and she unplugged it, and it has not been plugged in since.
This is why we can't have nice things.
I thought it felt super clever to me at the moment, but evidently...
Okay, here's what we need to do.
Okay.
All right, what we need to do is you need to tell me about a conversation that you guys have.
Oh, gosh.
And then I need to just call you like 30 minutes later, and you can put me on speakerphone, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I just got this message that you forwarded me from your Echo. And then you can say, it's not even plugged in. It's like you remember the old horror movies where like the call's coming from inside the house or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh my goodness. That would be
Here's
great.
the thing.
I think we can use this prank again.
Well, I'm actually not going to be a part of that prank going forward. Because here's the deal. I don't think she'd believe it was a prank. I think she would think it was real, and then I was just trying to say that it was a prank. And yeah, no, the whole Amazon Alexa thing has made the members of my household paranoid. So
okay, well, we'll cross that off the gift list for you.
So I have an Amazon Echo for sale if anybody wants one.
Thanks for listening to the Fill in the Blank podcast. To support our show, go to patreon.com/FITB. Patreon allows you to support our show on your terms. You can contribute any amount that you want, so you get to decide how much our show is worth to you. A challenge for our listeners is to support us by contributing just $1 per month. That's only 3 cents per day. Your support helps us grow our audience and upgrade our audio equipment. Thanks for listening to the show and supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/FITB. patreon.com/FITB.
All right, Keith, let's get to the topic at hand for tonight on our 25th Fill in the Blank episode. And what we want to talk about tonight is specifically related to, I know you've been getting the emails, I've been getting the emails. I am sure most of our listeners are getting all of the emails from the different, products that you use, online services that you have. And those emails are related to the privacy updates with their service. And so there's typically something you can click on to read about the privacy updates. Twitter, Facebook, Google, just about everything you interact with online is updating their privacy protocols and sending the emails out about that. And the reason that is being done is because not something that happened in the United States, but something that happened over in the UK, and it just went into effect this last week. So give us a little background on that. Tell us, first of all, what it's called, and then give us a little background on it, Keith.
Well, so this is referring to the GDPR, and it may not stand for exactly what you think when it starts with GD, but it stands for the General Data Protection Regulation, and this is now in effect across the EU, which is 28 European countries. So in a nutshell, this is a data protection law at this point. They call it regulation. It is a law that really aggressively kind of manages the way that companies use your private data. And so there are so many parts to this, and it really can be overwhelming. But the reason you're getting all of these emails with updated privacy policies is that any company that does business in the EU, which again is 28 countries, that does anything with just basic customer data is bound by this. So even if that company is not based there or has no formal operations there, if they do anything with a website or a web service or anything like that, that can do any kind of storage of customer data, even if it's just very basic stuff, they are bound by these. And so that covers most companies that you probably do business with in one way or another. And so they are bound by this new law that went into effect just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and one of the things I guess that is kind of interesting about the timing. So as you're getting this, you might think, as I initially thought, well, maybe this is related to, the Cambridge Analytica scandal that came out with regard to Facebook and some of the other privacy leaks that we have been made aware of. But this actually was passed by the European Parliament in May of 2016. So 2 years ago, this was passed, and the date for it to be enforced was May the 25th, 2018. So in many ways, they were talking about this, they were deciding it, they passed a law on this 2 years ago before any of these, data breaches became public. So I think that's interesting.
This is really difficult to implement in a short period of time. So I think it was just necessary to give everybody as much time as possible to get their business in order so that they can be compliant. And I mean, this is, whether you like regulation or don't like regulation really doesn't matter because this is now passed. And for most of our listeners are in the U.S., but we do have some European listeners. So if you're going to impose something like this, in the best of circumstances, with as much as had to change as a result of this, I think it was the right thing to do to give companies that much time to be compliant.
Oh, I think so. I think they definitely had to have those 2 years, particularly the smaller the business, because those are major issues related to how data is collected, and then ultimately, how data is used, and then how data is disposed of. I mean, I think that is part of what this protection regulation does, is it enforces how data is disposed of when it is retrieved. But I just think it's interesting that, it shows a lot of foresight, I guess, by this Parliament, or the folks that, presented the bill before Parliament. I guess they're called bills with the European Union. But I mean, there have been data and privacy issues that have been a part of the public square for a long time, well before they hit the news, sort of at a general consumer level.
We tend to have short-term memories, and so the most recent big data scandal is the Cambridge Analytica story that we talked about more than either of us really wanted to talk about, but it's such a big story,
right?
Based on how they were using data that they kind of extracted from Facebook, and so this predates that by years. And so just it going into effect now has nothing to do with that. But that situation is exactly what this is meant to stop. And so that tells you really how far ahead of the rest of the world this specific, regulation was.
Yeah.
So, if you look at the details of this, it does a lot. If we could just summarize what it does to kind of simplify it. Number one, they do explain what they mean by personal data. So if you're going to say you need to protect consumers' personal data, you have to kind of define what you mean by personal data. So it does that. And that may seem like it's not that big of a deal, but it is. Because if you were to ask someone, about their personal data, you and I may have very different definitions of what that is. So legally, it's important that you define that. And so it defines that, at least according to, what the EU considers personal data.
Right.
And then it gets into the matter of what you can do and what you can't do with that. One of the most interesting parts of this is that I'll read from the Wikipedia article here. It says, business processes that handle personal data must be built with data protection by design and by default. So that means that right now, most either social networks or websites or companies you do business with, they just assume you're giving permission, right? The box is automatically checked and you have to kind of opt out of things if you don't want to use them. Right, so we're kind of in this opt-out. Everything's included. We're just going to store all your stuff unless you tell us not to. This flips that around and says you have to explicitly opt in to all of the things that have to do with your personal data, which is a big deal. So it has to be designed with data protection by default. And so, you're going to get into the weeds on what that means, and it will mean different things based on what you're doing. So if you're just a website that sells T-shirts, for example, I'm going to have to ask for your address if I'm going to mail this to you, right? I'm going to need your email address so I can send you a confirmation and a receipt. So just something as simple as that requires me getting some personal data. And so that means that if I were selling just basic trinkets online to anybody in the EU, then I would have to be compliant with this. Even though I don't live there, even though I have my business is not based there. If I do business with anyone there online, then I am now responsible for their data. And so that means I would have to be a part of this. Now imagine kind of scaling this to like Facebook level or Google or even Amazon, right? These big companies. Now the good news is they have plenty of personnel around that can deal with this. So let me read you some of the details of what's involved here. This can get a little dry, could be a little boring, so we'll try to just keep it high level so that it's not really boring. But this is a really important issue that people need to understand.
Okay. All right, lay it on us.
Okay. So a processor of personal data, so that could be a website, that could be Facebook, or whatever, right? So a processor of personal data must clearly disclose any data collection, declare the lawful basis and purpose for data processing, how long data is being retained, and if it is being shared with any third parties or outside of the EU. So think about that right now. Do you know if you're using Google or if you're using Facebook or you just buy something from somebody online, how long they retain your data? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea how long they retain the data, and I have no idea what they do with the data beyond, the explicit or implied purpose that they've gathered my data for.
Yet we really right now have no idea what happens to our data.
None.
Right? We just don't. I mean, I don't. I consider myself, fairly educated in the, in the ways of the internet and how things worked. And, to date, I've not really had many issues, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe I do have issues that I'm not aware of. But this is a big deal. So they have to declare the lawful basis and purpose for processing that data. I have to tell you exactly why I'm using your data and what the legal basis for it is. I guess like the terms and conditions, the list of things is just going to be just enormous now.
Right.
But that's not bad. But I'll get to this in just a second. The way they have to disclose this is supposed to be in what they call a common format. So I'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
So they have to declare the purpose for the data processing, how long it's being retained, and then if it's being shared with any third parties or even outside of the EU. So if you are a European company and you do business with someone in the US and you want to sell this data to somebody else or just share it for whatever reason, it could be a really good reason that you would need to share it, you have to disclose that. So that's the first part of this. Now, moving on. Users have the right to request a portable copy of the data collected by a processor in a common format.
Okay.
So that means they can't put it in some weird format that you can't open or put it inside some weird compressed zip file that you have to go download something else to open and, or whatever, which I'm assuming companies have been doing. Otherwise, I don't know that they would have called, kind of spelled it out specifically. It must be in a common format.
Yeah.
And users also have the right to have their data erased under certain circumstances. I don't know what those certain circumstances are, but you can have it completely erased. So that's something that we don't have now. So if you decide, I don't want to do business with you anymore, get rid of my data, they have to do that. They have to erase it under whatever certain circumstances.
Okay.
Now, I don't know how you inspect this or how you hold them accountable if you're, the EU or one of these countries that's policing this.
Yeah.
But I guess if you were to sue them or bring suit against them, then they would have to prove that I don't know how you prove it's gone. How do you prove something doesn't exist?
I don't know. I have no idea about that.
I don't either. But I mean, it's, at least I think it's right to say that you should be able to have that removed. I don't know how you inspect. All right, moving on here. Public authorities and businesses whose core activities center around regular or systematic processing of personal data are required to employ a data protection officer who is responsible for managing compliance with the GDPR. Now, this doesn't apply to all businesses. You mentioned, very small businesses. If you're a 1 or 2 person shop, you don't have to hire a data protection officer. But so there are some specifics with how big your company is. I think this is similar to a lot of other laws or regulations where, depending on the size of your operation, you're required to have somebody that manages this part of your business or not. So again, public authorities and businesses whose core activities center around regular or systematic processing of personal data. What does that mean to you? Ross, what businesses do you think have core activities centered around the regular processing of personal data?
All business?
Well, but think about it. So if I sold you, if I'm the t-shirt seller, my business is t-shirts.
Yeah.
I only needed your address and email so I could send your shirt and send you a confirmation. So my main business is selling shirts, not using personal data as the key to running my business.
Right.
But I can think of some companies that is the core part of their business.
Oh,
the biggest one? Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, or anybody that is making, their primary business model is they're making money off of ads being run, and their ability to strategically advertise to, said demographic. And so they're
you just described Google.
Yeah, they're using that data. They're mining data to find out the most they can about everybody so that their advertising proves to be the most effective. And that's how they sell their advertising. That's how they make their money. And even the small business t-shirt company, they actually rely on Google or Facebook to be able to do that effectively. I mean, so there is a trickle down consequence for everybody involved in this.
There certainly is. But this language about businesses whose core activities center around regular or systematic processing of personal data, that was written for Google, and that was written for Facebook.
Absolutely.
And Amazon, to a slightly lesser extent, but not much, right? So Amazon can kind of hide behind, we just sell stuff online, or, this, but I mean, Amazon's whole underlying system is more and more reliant on personal data. To make it all work. It just has this layer on top of it that's about selling you stuff or providing, we just sell books and we sell stuff, we sell, paper towels and shoes and whatever, right? But it's your data that makes all that work. In our opening discussion, we talked about them sending a personal conversation to somebody else that it recorded.
Yeah.
So this certainly applies to Amazon as well.
And every time you're logged into Amazon, okay, so they're collecting information about where you are from your IP address. They are saving the information about your search histories, the things you're searching for, so that they can better tailor your user experience every time you open up the Amazon browser or use the app on your phone or iPad, so that they can, they can more quickly navigate you to the things they think you want based upon your past behavior.
Yeah. So this means that, larger companies that really just use data as the key to their primary business, they must employ a data protection officer. So that means that Facebook and Google, well, I'm assuming they already have these people in place, now have data protection officers. And that's their whole job, is to make sure that they manage compliance with the GDPR. Yeah. I think that's a good thing, right? You've got to have somebody, especially companies the size of those. I just really hope this doesn't impact MySpace, because I was really kind of feeling like MySpace was about to make a big comeback.
You're probably not the only one. Yes, yeah.
I hope Tom's doing okay.
Tom.
Do you remember Tom?
I do remember Tom.
Tom, everybody was Tom's friend on MySpace.
That guy's lonely. He's got to be lonely.
I hope he's doing all right. Okay, so here's another part to this that I really like. Businesses must report any data breaches within 72 hours if they have an adverse effect on user privacy. I don't know why they shouldn't have to. Well, I guess there are data breaches that don't impact users or any user data.
Yeah, that's probably right.
So, I guess that's why it has to say if they have an adverse effect on user privacy. But this is something we've heard about. How many companies like, oh, yeah, they were hacked 3 times last year. We're just now finding out. Oh. What'd they get? Oh, credit card numbers. Yeah, your entire history, credit scores, social security numbers, whatever. So businesses must report any data breaches within 72 hours if they have an adverse effect on user privacy. When I read this kind of summary of the things that this does, it doesn't seem like it's burdensome. I don't think any of this is outrageous. I don't think any of this just is like crazy or anything. What's crazy is that none of this was really required prior to this.
No, it wasn't. And you almost, as a user, just how naive we've been in the past. You kind of assumed that, nobody's using my data for harm. They're not using this against me or anything. And if a company got hacked and your data got stolen, I think you assumed somebody would call and let you know, or you'd receive an email about it. But that's not the case. Evidently, before this was not part of the requirement.
No, it's not. I kind of feel like this is like, like at one point, like my grandparents just smoked like 100 cigarettes a day. Just because like everybody smoked. Like, when did you start smoking? When I was 6 or 7, I don't remember, or whatever, right? I mean, like everybody smoked all the time. You go back and look at old movies. Do you ever watch Mad Men and your lungs hurt?
Oh,
because everybody's smoking just all the time.
All the time.
And so, it's like, and at some point we figured out like, oh, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. This isn't good. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. And then we put in, some pretty serious regulations on things, and the amount of people smoking just, has declined at a significant rate. Mm-hmm. And, cities and governments have put in, no smoking areas. You can't smoke anywhere. Even the ones that were kind of lagging behind finally caught up to those things. And, smoking's been on a pretty serious decline. I kind of feel like, at one point, everybody was very naive and like, no, this is fine. Everybody does it. Nothing can go wrong. And then for whatever happened, I don't know why it happened or any of the details around it, but it was like all of a sudden we figured out that smoking is actually terrible for you and we shouldn't smoke. And so we put all these kind of rules and regulations in place, and it's cut down on smoking quite a bit. And I would think that's a good thing. I kind of feel like this was, as naive as everybody was around smoking is kind of like where we are right now. Or like seatbelts. We just didn't think about it. Like, oh, no, just, cars are fine. And like, oh, well, if we put seatbelts in, fewer people will die. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we'll put them in there, but you don't have to use them. And then finally it's like, oh, yeah, it's now going to be a law. I do remember when seatbelt laws were passed, and there was a lot of people just freaking out about them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't need the government telling me what to do or whatever. It's like, no, it's probably a good idea if you wear a seatbelt. And then you start enforcing it, and what happens over time? Fewer people die.
Yeah.
There's cars are much safer, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But the big one is still seatbelts. So I don't know. I just feel like the time before these data protections was like we're just chain smoking in a car without seatbelts. We just didn't think anything was going to happen.
No, we didn't.
Kind of like, like you just, oh yeah, I'll just get a beer for the road. Which, that's not something I did, but that used to be a thing. Like, you grab a roadie. Right? Like, so basically what I'm saying is our grandparents and parents had all the fun, and now we've got to be the responsible ones that put your cigarette out and don't drink a beer before you get into your car, and make sure you put your seatbelt on.
Well, I'll tell you
but when we have self-driving cars, do you think we can have a beer in a self-driving car?
They'll probably have open bars in self-driving cars. That'll probably be part of the selling, yeah.
Maybe it'll be all right then.
Well, and so And also, on top of this, if companies are found in violation of this, there are some pretty steep fines that are regulated. I mean, GDPR, it also speaks about and regulates in writing what the fines are for these companies. And gosh, it seems pretty steep to me. I mean, it seems like real money to me. So the fine of 20 million euro or 4% of a company's global sales, whichever is higher for some of the serious violations.
Can you imagine that?
No.
That is an insane amount of money.
Oh, it is.
Okay, so I'm looking at a fine of up to 10 million euros. Mm-hmm. What is the, I don't know what the euro exchange rate is versus the U.S. dollar. Is euro worth more than $1?
Euro's worth more than $1. So it's
okay.
$13-14 million is what you're talking about.
Okay.
On 10 million euro.
All right. Or you said a percentage of their annual worldwide. This says turnover. What do they mean by? I'm looking at the Wikipedia article.
Uh-huh.
Is that revenue? I don't know what the word turnover means in this context. So it says a percentage. This article I'm looking at says 2%. Did yours say? Oh wait, here's another. Okay, there's two. Oh, there's two different things here. One of them says a fine of up to 10 million. Another one says 20 million. Oh, okay. It depends on the provision that they violate. Okay, I got it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one penalty that is a fine up to 10 million euros or up to 2% of their annual turnover. We got to figure out what turnover means.
I think that means global sales.
Global sales. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just go off in revenue of the preceding financial year in case of an enterprise, whichever is greater, if there has been an infringement of the following provisions. And so there's three different provisions here that they list. Or their fine can be up to 20 million euros or 4% of their annual sales for the preceding year if it's a violation of these other provisions. Yeah. So depending on how they rule that you violated this, oh my goodness, I don't know what, say for example, I don't know what 4% of their annual global sales is, but that's a big number.
Oh, it's got to be a huge number. And
that's a painful number.
And think about the money that's going into the European Union when they enforce those fines.
Who do you think the first company is that's going to actually be found guilty and have to pay a fine like that?
Oh, well, immediately lawsuits were filed against, what did I see? Facebook, Google, was it WhatsApp received a fine against them?
Maybe. WhatsApp is owned by Facebook.
Not a fine, but lawsuits immediately were filed when this law went into effect.
Okay, so who do you want to be found guilty of a violation and have to pay a fine?
Oh, I feel like Facebook has to be found guilty. That there's no way in the world they're not going to be found guilty.
I kind of feel like they deserve it. Is that bad? Is that wrong of me to say? But I feel like they deserve it.
They do.
I don't even have a great argument right now, like a specific one that I can say, oh, I'm pretty sure they're in violation of this. But at any given point, I feel like they're in violation of all kinds of stuff.
Well, and listen, I think Apple's in danger too. So one of the things I read, and I'll read, this is from VentureBeat. The proposal further states that mobile apps or internet services running on devices like smartphones cannot, and then here's the list of things they cannot do. They cannot intercept, record, listen into, or tap in your communications in any way to make use of that data, even if it's anonymized in some fashion.
Wow.
I mean, that's a pretty blanket statement of practices that are very likely going on. Intercept, record, listen into, or tap into your communications in any way to make use of that data, even if it's anonymized in some fashion. Even if who you are isn't, even if that's not compromised, so your identity's not compromised, but your data is, that's violation.
Wow. So what are your thoughts on this? Is this too harsh? Is this just right? What are your thoughts? Now, this doesn't apply directly to us as Americans. It applies to us indirectly in that there are going to be companies, because of the way that their business works and their interactions with European customers, they're going to probably implement this just across the board. So we'll be indirectly impacted by this. This is why we're getting all the emails with these updates to privacy policies, which is how our conversation started.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on this? Is it the right response? Is it not? Does it go too far? Does it not go far enough? How do you feel about this?
I think it is the right response. So, every industry is regulated, and we've talked about this. I mean, back before, the traditional telecom services, your landlines, even CB radio, sound waves, all of those things, there was regulation, FCC regulate all of those things. And so, no, it's time for regulations, and it's probably time that the bar is set high. At the same time, we know how smart these companies are. We know how much money that they generate, and they spend money to generate. And so, immediately you have rooms full of people looking for, okay, how do we continue to do what we do? How do we continue to make the money we make? How do we continue to use data in a way that's beneficial to us but doesn't violate these laws? And so, yeah, I think you set the bar high. I think there will be a lot of companies that adjust. I think it'll also narrow the field in a lot of industries, tech industries that, there are some companies operating out there, and, listen, I'm not saying that this creates a moral compass, but I am saying this creates a set of boundaries and playing rules that everybody has to follow along with. And I imagine, so the EU's the first. I imagine most countries, you will see them adopt these very similar restrictions. And, like you said, every company probably will just adjust to whatever the most strict restrictions are. And then, that'll be how it is, how they present themselves globally.
I tend to agree. I think this is a proportionate response to the overreach that's happened from Facebook and Google. I think those two companies specifically have done a terrible job of regulating themselves. And this is what happens when you don't.
Right.
If you don't use that power that you have, and let's face it, Google has monopoly power. And we've talked about this before. Because they own so much of the search market, because they have so much data that they use for, various purposes, they've not done a good job of clearly articulating in plain English how they collect that data and what they do with it.
Right.
Facebook is even worse because they keep getting caught doing some really shady stuff, and then they apologize and they keep doing more shady stuff.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's like a politician that keeps getting caught, but they keep getting reelected for some reason. Yeah. And everybody knows has all this baggage, but they just keep getting reelected because it's easier just to keep them there for whatever. I don't know. That may not be a great example, but I think this is a proportionate response. If it's harsh, to me that means that is the level to which the EU felt like it had to regulate this based on the kind of egregious nature of the way this data is being used without people's explicit permission.
I totally agree with that. And you also have to imagine, so this is the EU, all right? This is the place that has CCTV set up on every corner.
Right.
You can't roam through the streets of any European city without being, caught on camera. So these are people that are already used to having their, being tracked wherever it is that they go. And yet this is also the countries or set of countries that have decided, we think that what the internet's doing, what tech companies are doing with regards to monitoring behavior has crossed the bounds.
Yep. So I did read somewhere in all of this that this does not apply to the government.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that, and because certainly the government's gathering data. Certainly the government's doing that for national protection, whichever your government is, or threats upon other governments. So, who knows how all that's being used at a government level. But you're saying this only applies to the private sector, to the business sector.
So according to the Wikipedia article, it says the regulation does not purport to apply to the processing of personal data for national security activities or law enforcement of the EU. So to me, that sounds like I can't send a request to the government, pick a European country, the German government, and say, please erase all the data you have on me.
Right.
Or show me everything. Right. Remember we said it had to be a portable, the data had to be portable so that you can see it in a common format. Right. Please show me all the data you have on me. It doesn't sound like this applies to any government activities. I don't know that I understand why that would have to be, but then I also feel like, this seems really heavily kind of one-sided here. Like this stuff is really bad unless we're the ones that are doing it.
Right. Well, of course, they're the ones that get to make the laws.
Yeah, that kind of makes me a little nervous. I don't know. I'm not aware of how they're using all this. You're right. There's cameras all over the place. We already know. We haven't talked about China, and this is not a conversation about China at all, but China's been using their facial identification with their cameras all over the country. Yeah. Which is, just terrifying, quite frankly. And so we're not too far from that being the case everywhere, where once you've got face tracking and all those sorts of things, you're really getting into some sci-fi movie stuff there where, everybody's wearing hoodies and glasses and just stuff covering their faces and yikes.
Well, it is interesting, and it makes you wonder, I don't know. Of course, here I'm talking about things I don't know about now.
That's what our whole show is.
Yeah, as opposed to all the other times I talk about stuff, that I do know about. But, it does make you wonder. So does this set Google up to create loopholes by, having contracts with the government? So now Google will, they're going to continue to mine data the way they did, but now they're just going to do it for the government. The government uses that, and it creates some loophole for Google that they still get to collect all your information. Who knows?
It's possible.
Yep. All right. Well, so there will be more that comes out about this. I'm particularly interested to see, how the lawsuit, how all this ends up in court, who actually gets in trouble for these violations, and what the nature of the violations are. I think that will tell us a lot about, what companies are actually doing, how they're violating this. And so I think there will be lots to follow up in the months to come as, companies then get accused of, foul play with regard to this, to this privacy regulation. All right, Keith. Well, with that, let's talk about blank checks. What is your blank check of the week?
My blank check this week is a video service that I've been using for several years now called Acorn TV. And every time I mention this to someone, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Have you ever heard of Acorn TV?
Keith, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, so it's a streaming video service.
Okay.
And it is the best of British television. Well, that's what they say it is. So it's primarily British TV. They also have some shows from Australia and New Zealand. So this is just a streaming service that has exclusive content from, it's really all over the world, but it's mainly British television. So if there's a lot of British TV shows or even movies that you like that you can't find on Netflix or Amazon, chances are Acorn TV has it.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how I found out about this, but if you ever watch any of the shows like any shows on PBS like the Masterpiece Mysteries or things like that, I think I was probably watching some shows there and then, discovered that maybe some of them were on Acorn TV. So there's TV shows, there's old shows, there's new shows, there's exclusive shows that aren't aired anywhere else but on this service.
Okay.
So if you're into British television or you're just looking for something new outside of what you know on either Amazon or on Netflix or any other service, this is a great one. It's only $4.99 a month, so it's not terribly expensive.
Okay.
And it's got an app for your iPhone, your Android phone. You can watch it online. So it's a great place to catch up with your British TV if you were so inclined.
Oh, yeah. Well, so we've watched a couple of things. Broadchurch was one of those shows we watched that ended up showing up on PBS. Yeah, there are several of those types of shows, and you always end up being a season behind by the time it comes over here. And so, yeah.
Right.
Acorn TV, I didn't know anything about that, but I imagine that's in our future.
Well, my wife kind of makes fun of me because I love these like murder mystery shows for
Yeah.
some reason, and the British ones are so much better. I don't know why, but most of them, take place in like these really like scenic, idyllic, country villages or whatever.
Yes.
And so I don't know. I mean, there's something I was going to say really nice about them, but I can't really say really nice about a murder mystery. But anyway, there's so many good shows on here from all over the world. And so whether you're into drama or mysteries, there's some good documentaries, just all kinds of stuff. It's $5. So try it. I think they have a 7-day free trial. So try it out for a week if you're interested for free. And if you like it, it's only $5. They also have this deal where you can just pay $50 and get the whole year.
Acorn TV. Well, listen. So for the fill in the blank listeners, we'd love to know. Hey, Acorn TV, did you take a chance on it or not? We'd love to know. All right. So here's my blank check of the week, Keith. It's the Han Solo movie. It's the latest side story from the Star Wars, stories. The Han Solo movie came out last Thursday. And we saw it this weekend, and it was phenomenal. I really thought it was great.
I saw it as well, and we need to have a show where we talk about nothing but this. But it can't be this show because this show's over.
Yes, no, we're not going to talk about it.
Yep. So no
time.
spoilers here, but I'll just tell you, when we do talk about it, it'll be nothing but spoilers.
Nothing but spoilers. And, Keith, I think we can announce the surprise episode that's going to be coming up in the coming weeks. And that is going to be our Han Solo / Star Wars / possibly Marvel Universe episode with our teenage daughters.
I'm very excited about this.
I am too. So if you don't know, if you're a fill-in-the-blank listener and don't know about it, Keith and I both have families and have children. We have daughters that are almost exactly the same age, and both they've both learned to appreciate, I think, from great parenting, the Star Wars, the Star Wars stories. And so they've seen all of them, highly anticipated the coming of the Han Solo movie. They've both seen it, and we would love to have them join us on the Fill in the Blank podcast to talk about specifically the Han Solo movie. But I imagine, knowing them, the topic could stray all over the place. All right, Keith, it's been a great show, and I'm always glad to do this with you. Look forward to next week. Thanks for listening to Fill in the Blank, where we discuss how the technology of today impacts the world of tomorrow. We'll be back next week with another episode, and in the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at AskFITB or email us at fitbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the show, and if you like the show, tell your friends. And please rate us and review us on iTunes or from wherever it is that you're listening to the podcast. And remember the Fill in the Blank $1 challenge. Your support goes a long way. We'll see you again next week here at Fill in the Blank.